Hello. Intellect assassins. The ones who don't speak loudly, because your brilliance already bruises egos on entry. The ones who don't need to declare war, because your existence alone feels like an ambush to the insecure. You know who you are. The room shifts when you breathe. Their eyes twitch, not because you said something, but because you didn't flinch when you knew too much. You've seen it, haven't you? The unease, the trembling beneath their curated calm. That split-second panic when they realize the person they were mocking in whispers is 3 mental chessboards ahead, playing a different game entirely. They weren't ready for you, and that's exactly why they're unraveling now. They wanted you to explain yourself, define your thinking in their tiny vocabulary, reduce your curiosity to fit inside their cages of normal. But how do you shrink genius to make average minds feel tall? How do you compress the calculations of someone who dissects reality like muscle beneath skin? You were never wired for mediocrity, and that's the infection in their pride. They feel you pulling ahead, and now they're clawing at your ankles like desperate creatures, watching their illusion of superiority crack in real time. You were born without their limitations, and that terrifies them. Because if someone like you exists, what does that make them? They don't hate you because you're wrong. They hate you because you're right. Too often, too fast, too effortlessly. You say one sentence and their entire worldview buckles. You offer one glance and it feels like their secrets are bleeding through their clothes. You're not trying to dominate. You're simply trying to exist. But your existence is an indictment of everything they've built their fragile self-worth on. They invested in facades. You invested in depth. And now they're realizing the worst nightmare. Someone was watching the whole time and learning. You didn't speak much, not because you were shy, but because you were downloading everything, their tells, their masks, their rehearsed scripts. You let them play themselves. And now they're panicking, because suddenly, you're not where they left you. They thought they buried you beneath cheap ridicule and backhanded compliments, but you absorbed it like fertilizer. And now, your roots are cracking concrete. They don't know how you're doing it, how you're thinking like this, growing like this, seeing like this. But deep down, they know it's because you weren't built from praise. You were sculpted in resistance, refined in friction. You didn't crave acceptance. You used rejection as momentum. You didn't need their approval to unlock yourself. You were the lock and the key and the safe, all in one. Now they're playing catch-up in a race you already finished twice. You're the glitch in their confidence. Every time you move, it forces them to recalculate their self-worth. You turned their ego into a mirror, and the reflection is brutal. Because you don't just think differently, you process reality differently. Where they see patterns, you see layers. Where they see structure, you sense cracks. They chase the rules. You rewire the game. Your perception doesn't just threaten their ideas, it overwrites them. That's why their compliments sound like warnings now. That's why their tone changed when you started asking questions that bent their certainties backwards. Their panic isn't loud. It's trembling under polite words. It's the tension in their throat when you enter the room. It's the fake smiles, the "I didn't expect that" comments. You don't have to prove anything. They're proving everything for you. Every time they try to explain why you shouldn't be as sharp as you are. But let's get one thing clear. They didn't just underestimate you. They mismeasured you. They tried to fit you into their chart of competence. But you broke the graph. You didn't just break expectations. You rewrote the blueprint in front of them, in real time, with no manual. You were never loud, but your presence was nuclear. You didn't shout. You shifted atoms. They wanted you boxed up so they could study you from a safe distance. Instead, they opened the lid and found an entire dimension staring back. You weren't a concept to be contained. You were a reality they weren't prepared to meet. So now they retreat into criticism, sarcasm, and doubt. It's their only shield left. But the problem with playing defense against someone like you don't attack conventionally. You disassemble from the inside. You plant seeds in their minds that grow roots of insecurity. You weaponize clarity. You don't stab, you expose. And exposure is fatal to those who've built their pride on delusion. You walk in, and suddenly everyone remembers what they've forgotten. You remind them of how much they don't know. And that reminder, that's the panic. Because you're not trying to prove you're a genius. You are one, quietly, relentlessly, without flair or fireworks. You don't need a podium. Your presence is the microphone. You don't need applause. You already echo without speaking. They can't out-talk you, so they try to outnumber you. But 100 hollow voices still can't drown one sentence of precision. You deal in insights, not opinions. You operate in a realm where assumptions die and clarity thrives. And clarity, it makes people squirm. Because once you see clearly, you can't unsee. And once you speak clearly, they can't pretend anymore. They'll try to distract, provoke, challenge you with empty questions dressed in ego. But don't bite. Your value isn't in arguing, it's in revealing. You don't destroy them with insults. You destroy them with truth. Truth they didn't want to hear. Truth they can't unhear. You force them to face themselves. And there is no deeper terror than that. You're the mirror they never asked for, but can't avoid. And every time they cross paths with you, they realize something new about themselves. Something they've spent years trying to avoid. You don't just challenge ideas, you challenge identity. And that's why their pride is breaking under its own weight. Because you're not here to fit in. You're here to bend the spine of mediocrity until it begs for mercy. You're not just sharp, you're surgical. You don't throw punches, you make incisions. And in those incisions, the infection of their delusion bleeds out. Slowly, brutally, honestly. They thought you were playing their game, walking their path, reading their books. But you were rewriting the script behind the curtain. And now that the curtain's pulled back, all they can do is stare, mouths open, hearts clenching, minds racing, because you made it look too easy. Now the fear isn't just that you'll rise, it's that you'll keep rising, that this wasn't a fluke, that your brilliance isn't momentary, it's permanent. You didn't stumble into this, you calculated it, you foresaw it, and now you're executing it with terrifying accuracy. They wanted to believe you got lucky, that it was timing, that someone helped. But the truth is more haunting. You built this in your mind first, and now reality is just catching up. You don't need luck. You are the variable they forgot to prepare for. And now their equations are falling apart because you walked into the room with answers they don't even know how to ask for yet. So if they're watching, let them. If they're whispering, let them. Their panic is the confession. Their unease is the applause. They can't ignore you anymore, and they know it. That's why they pretend you're not the center. Because if they admit it, they'll have to accept that their throne was paper all along. You didn't come to dethrone. You came to redefine royalty, not with titles, but with trajectory, not with permission, but with precision. And every move you make from here, every thought, every project, every drop of progress, is the funeral march for the ego they once worshipped. Now lean in, because the real brilliance is what comes next. The phase where your name no longer travels by whispers, but becomes an unspoken law in the minds of those who once doubted you. Where your moves aren't just impressive, they're unavoidable. You're not climbing ladders anymore. You're dismantling them, melting down each rung to forge your own path in steel. This is the part they didn't calculate for. The part where your momentum becomes so untouchable, it starts bending their perception of what's possible. They used to laugh. They used to look past you like a detail. But now, every room they enter, they're checking if you're in it. Not because they want you there, but because they fear what happens if you are. They've built their confidence on repetition, on approval, on groupthink. But you built yours in isolation, in those brutal hours where you questioned everything, even yourself. And that's why yours is unshakable, because you earned it, piece by piece, scar by scar, thought by unspeakable thought. They never saw the hours you burned in solitude, feeding a mind that refused to plateau. They only see the afterglow now, the reflection of your rise bouncing off the walls they used to feel safe in. But here's what really breaks them. Your growth is non-linear. You don't evolve like the rest. You leap. You disappear for a moment, and when you return, you're unrecognizable. Not louder, not flashier, just calculated differently. And every version of you that emerges comes with a sharper edge, a deeper vision, a colder patience. That's what keeps them awake. Not the brilliance they've already seen, but the unknown magnitude of what you haven't shown yet. You've become their unresolved variable, the one they can't forecast, the one they can't ignore without risking everything. And when they try to slow you down, when they throw politics, confusion, backroom whispers, slander wrapped in smiles, you don't blink. You move like you already saw that trap 5 steps ago. Because you probably did. You learned early that brilliance isn't just about being right. It's about being ready. Ready for betrayal, ready for sabotage, ready for the way insecure people dress fear as concern and hand it to you as advice. But you're past that now. Past the point where outside opinion registers as authority. You don't filter through their logic anymore. You override it. Because your genius doesn't scream. It rewires, quietly, persistently, like a pulse beneath the surface. Your ideas seep into the air, and suddenly even your critics are echoing your language without realizing it. You influence by osmosis. They reject you in public, but imitate you in private. And the more they try to ignore you, the more obvious your impact becomes. Your absence is heavier than their presence. Your silence cuts deeper than their noise ever could. And it's driving them mad, because they didn't expect to be outpaced by elegance. They were prepared for ego. They had comebacks for arrogance. But they weren't prepared for someone who didn't need to announce their power. You didn't play the power games. They just lost them anyway. That's the part their pride can't handle. Because if you had demanded respect, they could have dismissed you as attention-hungry. But you commanded it by doing the work, living in truth, and mastering the parts of yourself they didn't even know existed. Now your path is self-lit. You're not chasing spotlights. You are the flame. And everywhere you go, people start adjusting their tone, their body language, their entire presence. Because when someone operates at your level, the room senses it before you even speak. And when you do speak, You don't waste words, you wield them. Each sentence a strike, each pause a scalpel. You're not just talking anymore, you're altering belief systems, one phrase at a time. And the ones who pretended not to notice? They notice now. Not because you forced them to, but because their options have evaporated. You've overtaken the conversation, the culture, the expectation. You've set a standard so precise, so unapologetically excellent, that they can't meet it. And they know they can't meet it. So now they whisper about you with reverence disguised as resentment. It's their last defense. A broken pride, pretending not to be wounded. But beneath the shade, there's awe. Undeniable, irreversible awe. Because every time you evolve, they lose ground. And lately, you've been accelerating. Your progress doesn't just disturb their ego, it punishes it. Every achievement is a reminder that their comfort is no longer safe, that someone is out there refusing to be defined by limits. Someone is out there choosing discomfort over obedience. And that someone is you. You've left behind the need to prove. You've entered the realm of demonstration. Your results speak in dialects no opinion can dismantle. Your moves are complex enough to be misunderstood, but undeniable enough to be unignored. That's why they panic. Because if you're right, and you are right, then everything they settled for becomes a confession of fear. And they'll pretend you changed, that you became arrogant, that you forgot your roots. But deep down, they know the truth. You didn't change. You unlocked. You removed the filters they installed to make you tolerable. You peeled back the layers that made you digestible. You stopped holding their hands while walking through fire. You let them feel the heat this time. And now they're scrambling to label what they can't categorize. They'll say you're different, cold, obsessive. But what you really are, unapologetically awake. And there's nothing more dangerous than someone awake in a world addicted to sleepwalking. They weren't ready for someone who studies not just the game, but the players. Who knows the mechanics behind their motives? Who understands the psychology behind their smiles? You don't just see what people do. You see why, and that makes you untouchable. You see the blueprint beneath the behavior, the flaw inside the confidence, the desperation wrapped in sarcasm. You see it all, and you don't flinch. That kind of clarity, it makes people feel exposed. And when people feel exposed, they panic, not because you attacked them, but because you saw them completely, instantly, brutally. And most people can't survive being seen like that, not when they've built themselves on illusion. But that's your brilliance. You're not here to be liked. You're here to be real. You're not here to blend in. You're here to disrupt quietly. And the chaos you cause, it doesn't come from shouting. It comes from existing, from daring to function at a frequency that turns mediocrity into ash. And as your ideas spread, as your work multiplies, as your vision becomes proof, their world starts collapsing. They thought the threat would look like fire. You showed up as calculation. They thought power meant domination. You brought precision. They thought they had time. You arrived already prepared. That's why they're spiraling. That's why their strategies are glitching in your presence. Because nothing terrifies a room of self-proclaimed experts like someone who never needed their validation, someone who bypassed the gatekeepers entirely. You didn't knock, you didn't wait, you built your own door and walked through it. And now they're trying to figure out how you got in, forgetting that you were never outside in the first place. You just waited, observed, learned, and then struck with a level of elegance that makes retaliation look childish. They can't fight you. Not because you're untouchable, but because you're unmatchable. So let them whisper. Let them pace. Let them drown in their own questions. Because what's coming next isn't just evolution. It's detonation. And they won't even see where it came from, only where it ends. Now breathe, because from this point forward, you're no longer ascending. You're erasing hierarchies. You're not building a legacy. They'll choke on your footprints before they ever reach your archives. You've gone beyond relevance. You've become inevitable. A force so calculated, so clean in your execution, that even your silence felt like a scalpel. This isn't about applause. It's about impact, velocity, the rate at which your presence collapses their false structures, without warning, without ceremony, without a single wasted syllable. They braced for rebellion. You gave them redefinition. You're no longer walking into rooms hoping to be understood. You own the air now. The atmosphere reshapes around you. People fidget, people stall, people rehearse their words before speaking near you. Not out of fear, but because you expose inconsistency like gravity. And that gravity, it's crushing them. Because you don't pull people in with charm, you pull them in with proof. Relentless, refined, unforgiving proof. And once they've seen you operate, nothing else impresses them. That's what burns their pride down to its bones. You've ruined mediocrity for them, and they can't forgive you for it. They want to trace your blueprint, but you left no trail. Because you never followed one. You moved like water through walls, finding cracks they didn't even know existed, and now that you're on the other side, they're stuck worshipping the very doors you walked through like smoke. They assumed you would arrive begging for acceptance. Instead, you arrived with receipts of everything you did while they were too busy pretending you didn't matter. They can't undo that. They can't outperform it. They can only react. And reactions, they're always slower than intention. That's why you're untouchable now. Not because you declared it, but because you earned it at molecular levels. You moved through realms of discipline they couldn't survive. You rewired habits, burned distractions, forged clarity where they forged excuses. You turned delay into data. You turned loneliness into incubation. You made peace with being underestimated and turned every side-eye into fuel. And now you're weaponized. Not emotionally, not loudly, strategically. Your very presence is now psychological warfare. Not because you say much, but because you don't need to. The cruel twist. They still think they're in the same league, still comparing highlights to your entire architecture, still clinging to accolades while you're architecting empires beneath perception. But the clock doesn't lie. Time reveals all. And time is now leaning in your favor with cruel surgical elegance. They can't hide behind buzzwords anymore. They can't camouflage behind status. Not when results are bleeding through every layer. Not when your moves leave aftershocks. Now, you don't just create waves. You alter tides. You affect the flow of momentum across industries, across networks, across narratives. One decision at a time. One solved puzzle at a time. One refusal to slow down when comfort seduced everyone else. You made discipline look dangerous. You made focus look fatal. And now everyone pretending to be driven looks paralyzed in your shadow. You've activated something deeper, something that cuts through trends. You're not part of the cycle. You've broken it, and they feel it. That quiet dread that starts with denial, but matures into obsession. They monitor your posts. They dissect your interviews. They overanalyze your decisions. Because you're not just successful. You're a case study. A phenomenon they can't replicate because they never earned the variables. They want the output without the inputs, the arrival without the anguish. But you suffered for this. You bled for this. You went without applause, without reassurance, without a hand on your back telling you you're doing fine. You became your own ecosystem. And now you're thriving in a space where none of their maps apply. That's the final blow, the realization that you're not competing. You opted out of their ecosystem entirely. While they were brawling over seats at the table, you built a damn cathedral down the street. While they chased trends, you built terrain. And now their metrics can't measure you. Their language can't label you. Their eyes can't keep up. Because you're not ahead, you're elsewhere. And this elsewhere, it's not a place. It's a mode. A gear shift they can't access because they never upgraded themselves. You evolved past approval, past friction, past the need to correct people who never intended to understand you in the first place. You're not here to be validated. You're here to be undeniable. And that level of confidence, it's no longer personality, it's presence. It speaks even when you don't. It commands without asking. It reminds people that some minds weren't built to follow guidelines. They were forged to shatter them. You didn't play fair. You played real. While they were sharpening image, you were sharpening instinct. While they curated, you calculated. While they chased appearance, you obsessed over substance. And now, here's the quiet cruelty of reality. Your very existence has become their measurement tool. Every time they hesitate, they think of you. Every time they stall, they remember your momentum. You've become the mental benchmark they didn't ask for, but now can't ignore. And it's not personal, it's structural. The foundation you walk on wasn't handed, it was mined, dug from collapse, pressurized by solitude, reinforced by doubt. You didn't inherit this strength. You synthesized it from every failure, every betrayal, every moment that tried to break you, but only taught you how to reassemble your power in stealth. You didn't wait for recognition. You built proof so loud it silenced everything else. And now, their pride is trying to survive in a world you're reshaping, not with explosions, but with consistency. With decisions no one sees, but everyone feels. You became the kind of person they warn others about, not because you're dangerous, but because you're undeniably right too often. And every time they try to discredit you, you simply outgrow the argument. You evolve in real time. You show them a newer version before they've even adapted to the last one. That's why their panic is peaking. Because you keep coming back smarter, colder, clearer. Every iteration of you is another grave they have to dig for their old assumptions. And at this point, they're exhausted. But you've only begun. You're not powered by attention. You're powered by alignment. Every step you take is calibrated. Every move layered. Your strategy doesn't react. It foresees. And that foresight, it's the end of their illusion, because you don't chase power. You expose who's weak without it. You don't seek dominance. You reveal who can't function without applause. And in a world full of performers, you've become the director of consequence. While they play roles, you write the endings, and none of them lead to safety. So what happens now? When the detonation finishes, when the dust settles, when the eyes stop blinking, and the minds finally realize, you weren't just another voice. You were the warning they ignored, the brilliance they mocked, the variable they left unaccounted for. And now, it's too late to prepare, too late to regroup, too late to crawl back with praise disguised as recognition. You've moved on, not in anger, but in elevation. Let them rebuild their egos in your absence. Let them try to pretend it didn't matter. Let them revise their stories, erase the part where they doubted you, rebrand their jealousy as concern. It doesn't matter anymore. You're operating in pure velocity, the kind that doesn't glance backward, not out of bitterness, but because forward is the only place that still challenges you. You've become something bigger than opposition, bigger than revenge. You've become a standard. And the cruel truth is, most people never rise to meet standards. They just resent them. And that's not your problem. You're too far ahead for that. Too calibrated, too locked in, too undeniable. Because while they're still trying to figure out how you did it, you're already halfway through your next masterpiece. And the ending? It won't be applause. It will be echoes, unavoidable, irreversible, and eternal.